If you are new to this series, we have been going through every single national title claim in college football history for the FBS or highest level at the time it was claimed. At this time, we have covered all of the one-time and two-time champions and are moving on to the threes and beyond. Please go back and watch those for me after this if you enjoy this sort of thing. From here, some teams will still be lumped together and some will get their own depending on how much of an argument I feel is needed. So, let's get chronic. Prior to the college football playoffs and BCS national title game, we relied only on the polls to determine the college football national champion, with some formulas and short-lived systems in between attempting to better things. The polling system failed many times, with as many as 4 to 6 teams in contention that never even played each other. This often resulted in many split national championship years. Prior to 1965, some polls voted on their national champions before the bowl games were even played, and then saw their champion lose their final game. If you go back a little further, the first attempt to straighten things out came in 1936 with the creation of the AP poll, and was often the most respected poll for many years. But even then, the early media had their biases and favorites due to what they were familiar with. If all the writers and voters only saw Notre Dame or Yale, they would have no way to compare it to what was going on down south or out west, and usually just sided with what they knew. Prior to the AP, we had a wild, lawless 67 years of college football where many or no teams called themselves national champions, and a lot of those teams didn't even claim national titles in this era until more modern polls went back and retroactively named them national champions. Are you confused yet? You should be. While the AP poll is often the benchmark for a champion from 1936 to 1998, I would still argue that point. If the AP named you champion and nobody else did, that smells a bit fishy. Personally, I tend to side with what a majority of the polls say. So if the AP says you are the champ, but 11 others don't, I look deeper into the situation. And that's just me. You are free to do or think whatever you like.
Jerry, just remember, it's not a lie if you believe it.
And of course, I view any titles won through the playoffs or BCS title game as automatically 100% legit from the start of the video, even if you disagree with the selection committee. And yes, I have also disagreed with them plenty of times. On the flip side, any that claim a separate title outside of those official parameters I view as complete bullshit, whether the selection committee screwed said team or not. History is history, and I respect that fact, even if I dislike that fact. For the purposes of this channel, I'm only going by what the school actually claims. I will do a series covering unclaimed titles later on. I have added a layer to my tiers and now broken them down into 5 sections. 100% legit, debatable but fair, I see your argument but no, complete bullshit, and introducing 1941 Alabama, which will be reserved for the most imaginary or dumb claims that exist. The Iowa Hawkeyes. Yeah, I know. It is surprising to find them in the party of 5, and you really don't hear them brag about it that much. I've met maybe 2 Iowa fans in my life. Granted, I have lived in the Southeast for roughly 85% of my life. I've also been out there and worked professionally in college sports and still haven't come across that many. I even stopped in a gas station in Iowa once and they had lots of Nebraska stuff for sale, but I think that was right on the state line. Regardless, my point is, for a team claiming 5 national championships in football, you'd think it would be a little bit more common on a national scale. Could it be because the last claim was the year my mom was born? Is it because the last shared conference title was when I was in high school, or the last outright conference title was before I was born also? Or maybe some of these aren't so legit. And look, it's not like the program has been bad. They've had 4 10-win plus seasons since 2015, and that season was a 12-2 squad who finished number 5 in the final CFP ranking. Buckle up, baby. We're going way back to check out these 5 national title claims for Iowa football. A quick reminder as always, we didn't have a major poll ranking until 1936, so a lot of schedule strength is just an estimation based on traditional powers of the early days. Our first claim comes all the way back in 1921 under legendary Iowa and USC head coach Howard Jones. We have covered this season in the series twice already, but I'll come back to that in a moment. On the season, the Hawkeyes went a perfect 7-0 with key wins over Notre Dame 10-7, Illinois 14-2, and Purdue 13-6, and were retroactively named national champion by the Billingsley Report and co-champion by Park H. Davis. And if you don't know Davis by now in this series, well, let's just say he's a guy who could never make up his mind when he named champions from 1869 to 1933, and sometimes made very questionable picks to fit his own agenda. Granted, he got it right on half the occasions. Anyways, for 1921, California, Cornell, and Lafayette all claim the title in their history books. I have already hit the Leopards and Big Red. Please go check out those for deeper context. But the short is, Lafayette seems fair enough to go 100%, as did Cornell. I haven't gotten to Cal as of this writing, but they are coming up very soon as a fellow 5-time champion. Now, while I gave those other two a 100% stamp of approval, it was really a case of convenience on their part. Both played what can be considered a strong schedule, and both did not lose or tie, nor did they cross paths with the other two champion claimers. If I had to pick one single champion for 1921, it would in fact be Iowa over everyone. The win over Notre Dame was possibly the most quality win in the nation. The Irish crushed almost everyone else on their schedule and finished 10-1. There's nothing here to discredit Cornell and Lafayette, but the Notre Dame win makes me at least think they'd have a good shot at winning a hypothetical 4-team playoff against the other three. Iowa is 100% legit for 1921 and would be my overall top pick. And just a foreshadowing, no, Cal will not be joining the other three in a 4-way tie for 100% legit. Flip the page to 1922. The Hawkeyes again went 7-0, beating the likes of Knox 61-0, Yale 6-0, Illinois 8-7, and Purdue 56-0. The team was named national champions retroactively by the Billingsley Report, and again 4 teams claim the 1922 title, and 3 are the same. Cal, Cornell, and Princeton this time around being the others. As I mentioned in the Cornell video, the Big Red and Princeton had similar resumes, with the Tigers playing a tougher schedule and the Big Red doing better overall on the field. Cal out west could, in their own right, be compared on a similar level to both. I've already called Cornell 100% legit in that video, as finding separation between some teams is just impossible here. Notice how I said some teams. With 4 championship claims, we have to split some hairs here, and Iowa seems to be the weakest of them all. The Hawkeyes played only one team with a winning record in Yale at 6-3-1, and just barely won against 2 other very weak opponents. So I'd have to value them a little less, but I think it would be unfair to dismiss them altogether. They did go undefeated and untied with a championship selector to pick them. While I'd love to throw them out altogether, I don't see how I could, as they are defending champions. I will go with debatable but fair. This is really just a case of them going from my most respected of the 4 in 1921 to my least respected in 1922, but still legit to some degree. We now jump ahead 3 decades to 1956. The team had been pretty bad the season prior and understandably entered the season unranked. After disposing of Indiana 27-0 in Week 1, they moved up to number 20. They would hold on to their newfound rankings the next several weeks in some tight ones to enter the brutal part of their schedule in November as the number 17. The Hawkeyes then lost 17-14 to number 17 Michigan, but bounced back beating number 6 Minnesota 7-0. The new number 6 Ohio State 6-0, and eventually number 10 Oregon State 35-19 in the Rose Bowl. And fun fact, they had also defeated the Beavers in Week 2 of the regular season 14-13. Iowa was named champions by one outlet I don't think I've mentioned in this series yet, the College Football Researchers Association. This is sort of a committee that was formed in 1982 and went back to retroactively name some champions from 1919 up until its formation. And for some reason, they still name a champion to this day, though it's always just what everyone else says, so it seems redundant in current times. Iowa finished ranked number 3 in the AP poll, and remember, the AP wouldn't start voting on their national champions until after bowl games permanently until 1968. But here's the thing, it would not have mattered. While number 2 Tennessee did lose their bowl game, number 1 did not play one, and Iowa beating number 10 would not have overtaken the real champions Oklahoma, who absolutely destroyed every team they played aside from 2. But they still beat them decisively as well. Putting Iowa on the tier list is tough here, but I'm ultimately going to go with bullshit, and here is why. I think we can all agree that the claim isn't legit. I personally respect the grind, playing such a tough schedule in the home stretch and winning 3 out of 4 of them. The bowl game is what it is, a rematch with a team they already played and they still only played 10 games, just like Oklahoma. The reason I go bullshit over a tier higher is that Iowa has no ground to stand on aside from strength of schedule. It's 1 loss versus 0 losses with the same amount of games. At no point was Iowa ranked number 1 and Oklahoma even got the consensus crown. The next claim is 1958, and if you've seen this series from the beginning, you already know, but just humor me for a minute. The in-between year of 1957 had been a close one at 7-1-1, so momentum was still running strong. The Hawkeyes impressed immediately, beating number 6 TCU 17-0 in Week 1. The following week, the team tied Air Force 13-13, but hey, let's not knock them for that. The Falcons finished 9-0-2 this season, and if they were Auburn or Alabama, Air Force would claim this national championship too. Following the Air Force tie, the Hawkeyes went on to beat number 4 Wisconsin 20-9 and number 8 Northwestern 26-20 to climb to a number 2 ranking by the Ohio State game. Iowa would lose that one to the number 16 ranked Buckeyes 38-28, but finished strong, beating number 15 Notre Dame 31-21 and number 16 Cal 38-12 in the Rose Bowl. The team finished ranked number 2 at 8-1-1 and were named national champion by the Football Writers Association of America. Auburn and LSU both claimed this championship for 1958, also with Auburn only recently doing so in 2025. I've covered both of these in their videos, but breaking news: I'm changing one of my tier rankings right now as I have new levels since the original Auburn video was made. 1958 Auburn is dropping to the 1941 Alabama tier. Auburn claims this off the Montgomery full season rankings. This claim is made up, and that selector isn't even a real thing. Just some dude in Montgomery, which is only 50 miles from Auburn, by the way, said so. So they accepted it for clout. Okay, back to the point. LSU also claims this national title, and they should. They went 11-0 and were consensus national champions. I see why Iowa would want to claim this title, as their schedule was tough and the FWAA is something, but were wildly inconsistent. But a loss and a tie is still the result, and it's not like LSU was a small school playing small competition. Much like the previous claim, Iowa never reached number 1, and LSU held that ranking for their final 5 games. Iowa's claim to 1958 is going to have to be complete bullshit. 1960. This year is a nightmare of claims, and none of the teams were perfect. Iowa began the season ranked number 19 and got off to an unbelievable 6-0 start with wins over number 10 Oregon State 22-12, number 6 Northwestern 42-0, number 13 Michigan State 27-15, number 12 Wisconsin 28-21, number 16 Purdue 21-14, and number 19 Kansas 21-7. That's right, every single opponent so far was ranked. In the next contest, they dropped their number 1 ranking with a loss to number 3 Minnesota 27-10. Iowa bounced back the following week with a win over number 3 Ohio State 35-12 and closed the season with a 28-0 win over unranked Notre Dame, the only unranked opponent of the whole damn year. The 8-1 Hawkeyes were named national champions by a handful of selectors, but finished number 2 in the coaches poll and number 3 in the AP. Minnesota, Ole Miss, and Washington all claimed 1960 as well. I have already covered Washington and Ole Miss. I called the Rebels' claim bullshit as they tied an unranked LSU, and in the scope of 1960, that's way worse than any of the losses to a highly ranked team. I called the Huskies fair because in the Rose Bowl, they defeated number 1 Minnesota 17-7, and if you're keeping score, yes, that's the same Minnesota team that beat Iowa. I'm actually not sure how Minnesota ended up number 1 in the AP and coaches poll, having lost their 8th game to unranked Purdue, but needless to say, I don't put all my stock into those polls this season. I guess I have to see 1960 Iowa as somewhat equal to Washington because of the Huskies' Rose Bowl win over the Gophers. But at 4 ranked games versus 8 ranked games, it's a tough pill to swallow. Therefore, as much as I want to make Iowa 100%, and as much as I like to believe they were the best team in the country, I can't prove that, and I have to stay consistent at debatable but fair. But wait, since so many of you have asked, I'll do it. but it's going to be quick because there isn't going to be much suspense, and I'll be hit with a copyright claim on almost any clip I try to use, but we'll see what workarounds I can find. The 2025 Indiana Hoosiers entered the season with some expectations at number 20, but probably not the ones they'd ultimately meet. The team really turned heads in Game 4 when they defeated number 9 Illinois 63-10. By the time they beat number 3 Oregon on the road 30-20, 2 games later, everyone knew there was something there. They kept cruising along until they were seemingly beat at Penn State down 24-20 with little time remaining. Fernando Mendoza solidified his legend status, however, when he led a game-winning 80-yard drive in 1 minute and 15 seconds to win the game on a pass to Omar Cooper with 36 seconds left. The odds again seemed stacked against the Hoosiers when they faced a loaded number 1 ranked Ohio State team for the Big Ten championship. But again, Indiana found a way to win and won their first conference title since 1967 and the first outright conference title since 1945. The team entered the playoffs ranked number 1 and destroyed number 9 Alabama 38-3 in the quarterfinals and number 5 Oregon 56-22 in the semifinals to set up a college football playoff national title game with number 10 Miami in Miami of all places. The game was a bit closer than expected, but again went the way of the Hoosiers. At 16-0, Indiana tied 1894 Yale for the same record in all of college football history. But let's be real, the Yale team was far less impressive for so many reasons. 5 opponents not even being college teams, a completely different style of game, and so on and so on. 2025 Indiana is legit as legit can be and belongs in the discussion of the top 5 best teams in college football history. Lately in this series, I've been ending with my thoughts on if I think the team in question, or teams in this case, will be adding to the trophy case anytime soon, like within the next 5 to 10 years. For Indiana, that is a very difficult question to answer. I would say, unless you have a phenomenal coach like Curt Cignetti, I don't see it, but that's exactly what they have. However, I'm going to give a hot take and say no. According to 247 Sports, the Hoosiers had the 29th ranked recruiting class, and while Sig can easily do a lot with that, I find it hard to believe that he will find a perfect diamond in the rough like Mendoza again. Much like Coach O and LSU never found another Joe Burrow. Another reason I say no is I don't think Indiana gets past Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, and any other dangerous teams that emerge on a year-to-year basis. Not to say they won't beat these teams from time to time, because they will. It will just likely not come together perfectly again. With all that said, Curt is building a culture, and those fans proved they, well, exist. Who knew? I see them getting back to the playoffs at least once in the next 10 years. Just not winning the whole thing. But shit, if anyone can prove me wrong, it's this guy. For Iowa, this is a really tough call. They actually finished a little higher in recruiting at number 26. And for what it's worth, they rose as high as number 2 in 2021 and have finished ranked in the final CFP 5 of the last 7 years. Some even speculate that if they had a little more offense, they could have made a splash in 2025. They did lose to Indiana by only 5 and to Oregon by only 2. This proves to me that they can compete with playoff teams as recently as well now. The same tough opponents that will plague Indiana in the near future will also plague Iowa, including Indiana themselves. Believe it or not, I think if Iowa gets a nice quarterback and receiver duo, maybe even throw in an elite tight end as usual, and keep the defense and offensive lines built up, it isn't that far of a stretch to see them making it in as an at-large playoff team within the next 10 years. And from there, anything can happen. But to answer the question one way or another, no, without an Indiana-type run, I don't see them hoisting the big prize soon. And there we go. If you feel I was unfair or missed a piece of info, go ahead and make your case in the comments. Please go check out the other videos in this series, there is a playlist for them, and I just recently finished up all the teams who claim 4 titles. And remember, this is just one guy on YouTube who did some research and gave an opinion. I'm sure I won't change any fan base's opinion on the titles they choose to boast about, and certain fan bases have made that pretty clear thus far. This has been College Football Chronicles, and I hope you join me next time.